What is up, guys? Thanks for tuning in. I have a wheel bearing video for you today. This is on the Dodge Ram 1500. It's the first generation. This is a 98, but I believe it's the same for 96 to 99. I could be wrong. All-wheel drive will have the hub assembly, so you'll be able to use the 3 bolts on the opposing side, take them out, and you'll be able to replace the whole hub assembly. But with the rear wheel drive, you have a, let's call it a carrier bearing. So you have an inner bearing or an outer bearing. The inner bearing is going to be a little bit wider, and the outer bearing is going to be a little bit smaller. As you can see, you'll need to grease it up with wheel bearing grease as well. And let me show you what I mean. This is already taken apart. You will need to use a, where is it, 3/8. Yep, 3/8 Allen key to remove your caliper bolts, and essentially the rest should come out once you remove this. There'll be a cotter pin, there'll be a retaining pin, retaining nut, should I say, and then an actual nut. It's a 27 millimeter, which you'll go ahead and take it off, and that will leave you with your rotor. Your rotor is literally going to slide right off. And you could also use this video to replace your studs. You just bang them out and then bang the new ones in. But here we have the old bearing, which is out. So you'll have the race sit inside here. This is what we call a race or a collar. And that's going to sit in like so. And we will press it in, or you can bang it in very carefully. So this is the old one. It's still intact, but I'm replacing both bearings. This one's a little greasy and crunchy. It's full of crud, and that will cause premature bearing wear. This is the seal, which sits on the outside once you press in the new bearing or the new race, because the bearing literally just falls into place like so. But you'll want to grease it, and this is how the bearing will spin inside the shaft on the knuckle right there. So with that said, this will go in like so, and then you'll have your seal. Once this is all pressed in, this seal will go like that to retain the bearing grease inside there. And how to get it out, you guys are probably asking. If you don't have a press, you can use a socket and this little hammer here. So essentially, I'll put it on the lip of the bearing, and then I'll whack it here, and then I'll go on the opposite side, whack it there. There's 3 little notches. Let's see if you could see them. You could see it on this side, but there's a notch there, as well as here. So that's where you kind of put your sockets. If you look down there, there's one over here, one right here, and one at the bottom right there. So you could just see the lip of the bearing. So you can bang that out, and then you'll use the old bearing or the old race to bang it back in. That way you don't damage the new bearing. But you have to do that carefully, and you have to do it, what should I say, equally. So you have to make sure that you're not banging on one side. You want to kind of tap it all the way around and slowly get it to fall in. There is no grease needed when you put this in. Some people will grease it up or heat it up. It's not really that necessary. Like I said, you just want to lightly tap it along with the old bearing and get it in there. You might be able to do it with a rubber mallet, and that should work just fine. But like I said, to take it out, you'll have to either use a long flathead or something. But I use this 1/2 inch 17 millimeter socket, as well as a 1/2 inch extension to get it out. So I'll get out the other side, and then I'll show you how to put it in. All right, there is the old one. That is out. Smells like burnt bearing. But that is all set. Out with the old, in with the new, as I like to say. Clean it up. And get it ready for the new bearing. And again, this goes like that, not like this. Doesn't go like that. This goes face down. So that's going to go in like so. And I like to push it down. But also, you see how it's cockeyed. We can fix that. So this is a rubber mallet. I never hit it metal to metal. So this rubber mallet should kind of do the trick for me. And we'll use this to make sure that it's banged down all the way. And it looks to be all the way in. Oh, yep. Now I gotta get this old race out. All right. All right, so that one is in there. We got the new race in there. It looks like it's flush. It sits good. This is for all the backyard mechanics to show that you can get it done. So look, no damage done at all. So went right in, and obviously you want to pack that with grease. So we're going to do the same with the other side for the race, and we'll get that race in as well. So that's how the race is put in with old and new parts. It can be done. So let's jump to the other side. Old bearing. Alright, so now that the races are installed on each side, that's the outer bearing, the smaller one. The inner bearing is the larger one, as you see here. So you're going to want to use some type of wheel bearing grease. This is high temp disc brake wheel bearing grease. So we'll take a glob of that. Make sure you have a glove. Scoop it up, and then you just want to fill it up in here, fill it in there. Obviously the opposite side as well. And then you want to go over to here. Before you apply the new grease, you want to make sure all the old grease is off. As you can see, the shaft is nice and clean. There's no grease. So we're also going to grease up the shaft as well. Kind of keep the grease away from the threads, because we don't want that nut backing out. I mean, we do have the cotter pin, but we don't want it to back out any more than it has to. So make sure that the shaft is clean and is ready for the new grease. So I'll pack it now. All right, so the bearing is greased. Let's see, the bearing on the other side is greased. You want to grease it up on the inside, on the race, on the bearing itself. So I like to put grease in my hand and then just move the bearing within my hand along with the glove, because it gets messy. Clean up any excess, as you can see, especially on the rotor. The rotor does not like grease. As you can see, it is all packed and it is full of grease. So now we can go ahead and install it. All right, so now it's in. Like I said, try and keep the grease off the threads, as well as the grease off the threads on your nut, because that'll cause it to back out. That's why we have the cotter pin in there that sits in that hole there. As you can see, it's all greased up. I don't know if you can see the back. As you can see, the back is sitting in there, and it's sitting well, sitting flush, and it's got grease. And then I like to give it a test spin Make sure it's nice and it's moving freely. So that bearing's coming out. So make sure that bearing stays flush in. Said it's tough with the grease, it gets real messy. So now, my other hand, you'll put this washer in, and then you'll put the nut. Okay, so now we're at the tightening part, and there is not many things out there in regards to the bearing replacement of this and the torque specs. And don't get it twisted, do not torque this down to 175 pounds or 180 pounds. This is lightly torqued. And what I mean by lightly torqued is what I do is I tighten it down to 12 foot-pounds, and I make sure that it spins. And obviously, there's no play back and forward. So you give it a wiggle, make sure it's all set. And then I torqued it down to 20 foot-pounds. That's the max amount I would recommend for you to torque this down. So torque it down to 20 pounds. After you torque it down to 20 foot-pounds, back off a quarter of a turn. So if you look at this as a pie, cut it down the middle, cut it down the side. So imagine that there was a T going across. So let's say you tighten it down, and let's say your torque wrench is going straight like this. So you're going to back off a quarter of a turn. So let's say we back off a quarter of a turn. Boom. So if my wrench was like that, I'm going to back off a quarter of a turn like so. Release it. Double check again, which I have already, after torquing it down to 20 foot-pounds and then backing off a quarter of a turn. And then we're going to look. All right, so that doesn't line up. Let's see if I can find a spot that does. So it looks like that lines up well. So now you have this. Go ahead and put your cotter pin in, and then we're going to put on the wheel, and then we're going to check for play. So I'm going to put my cotter pin in, and then we'll put on the wheel as well as the caliper. Don't forget the caliper, and then check for play. All right, guys, so we got our caliper back on along with the brake pads that are attached to them. And we put our dust cap on. And again, do not over torque this 20 foot-pounds and then back off a quarter of a turn. Hand tighten the nut if you need to. Put the cotter pin in, put the dust cap on, you're done. If you guys do over torque this nut, you will demolish and crush the bearings, and you will have a bad day, and you will be stuck on the side of the road like this. This was me. Ka-chow! Who's doing better than the Dodge Ram? Hi! Alright guys, so it is all put together. You torque the wheel down, and you want to check for play up and down mostly. So there is no play up and down, and what I mean is in and out, up and down. So put your hands at 12 and 6 o'clock, and then wiggle, make sure there's no play, and then the same left and right. But I do have some play left and right, but that's because of my tie rods. So I need to replace my tie rods, but I have just a little play. But I know that, so therefore this test up and down is normally tested for the wheel bearing when the wheel bearings go bad. So like I said, give it a wiggle left and right, up and down, mostly up and down, and you should be all set. And give it a spin. That's the brake pads rubbing. That is not the bearing, because these rotors aren't brand new, and neither are the brake pads. But she's spinning, and it's good, and it's solid. I'd say that's good to go. So if you guys found this video helpful, as always, like, comment, and subscribe. And thanks for tuning in.